Okay, that's us on the hour. So we're just about to start our second last webinar of this session. Tonight's webinar is not one of the SELFIE categories, but a really important area, and I'll describe a little bit more about it. And it's unbelievable that we're in February already, and we're really coming to the end of this journey for this year's sort of cohorts of schools going through this learning journey and going for their SELFIE award, which some of you will be getting validated in the coming weeks ahead. So hopefully this session isn't too late to help you with that journey and help sharing. But the great thing about it is that we've got some real professionals here tonight that are going to give you some insights into the journey that they had with their remote learning. And it's one of those areas that has touched everybody the last few years with everything that's happened in the schools. We've all got our experiences and the challenges, the barriers that we had, as well as the surprises, and even I suppose the changes to that whole learning process that's happened. And I'm sure our speakers tonight will touch on that. And as well as myself, we've also got Aoife here tonight on the call. She'll give me a little wave there. Because these sessions are deliberately kept quite succinct and down to just 30 minutes, if you've got any questions or thoughts or reflections that you want to share, please put them on the chat and somebody will comment or pick them up, and that way it just helps keep these sessions short and we don't end up going down some rabbit holes discussing areas and then it runs over slightly. So you'll see from our delivery here, we're on our second last webinar. We're on remote learning, which, as I said, is not one of the SELFIE categories, but it's two very important areas that we want to include as part of this journey, because that and STEAM are both areas that schools really have to consider and take account of, as I said, with remote learning, especially for the last couple of years. So what we've got tonight is we've got three speakers. Two, Yvonne and Killian, are from Blackrock College in Ireland. And we've also got Matea from the DOBA Business School in Slovenia. And Matea's going to speak first, and she's got some slides she's going to share with us. And Yvonne and Killian are going to have a chat with you about their journey and share some of their challenges, barriers, and what they've adapted within the school and how it's changed the learning process. So I think you'll find tonight's information really useful and inspiring. We do appreciate how busy you are, so we will keep this to 30 minutes. The last session is on the 21st of February, so in 2 weeks' time at the same time, and we'll have another couple of great speakers with us then. So I'm going to stop sharing, and Matea, if you want to get going and share with us your remote learning journey.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think you can see now my presentation. So hi,
Yes.
hello, good evening, good afternoon from Slovenia. Thanks for the invite. It's great to be here. My background, just to be very short, is over 20 years working at the National School for Leadership and Education. But lately I'm working at the higher education institution that runs all its programs online. But it's really a context that is not entirely relevant for a primary and secondary education because of several reasons, obviously. But we actually have students that are older, most of them already employed, and all of them actually decided to want to study online. So that's probably one of the changes in terms of what we like to say, that the context matters. So what I would like to emphasize today are some of more, let's say, general considerations that you need to have in mind, no matter what kind of remote teaching and learning you decide to do in your school. So I will basically be talking about teaching and learning from that perspective. I think it's safe to say that today digitally enhanced teaching and learning is implemented in many ways and in various modes of delivery. And with the most advanced forms, education is transformed into digital education, which is characterized by some new conceptual and implementation models of education, which not only bring significant changes in learning and teaching processes, but what I also find extremely important to emphasize, also transform other, let's say, supporting processes in the educational institution, its strategic views, its values, its abilities, its organization, really. So what I will start with is that it's not really a question of to be or not to be digital, but it really is a question of how to be digital in order to address our students the way we should, in order to address the teachers as well. To make just a short throwback, let's say like that, in 2008 in Talis, in Slovenia, for example, our teachers ranked or assessed their abilities to use ICT for in teaching processes was rather high. So they felt really confident about it, while also admitting that they don't really use it as much as they could or as much as they should. And then this unplanned experiment of universal use of information and communication technology in education happened, the so-called Corona Challenge or emergency remote teaching. And after that, I think there were many insights into what we can do, many insights into what is still ahead of us, what answers we still need to, what questions we still need to answer. So after that, now it's been a couple of years. If we look at the different web pages, if we follow the process of the development that's been rather quick, we can see that there are new ideas that emerge, that we are talking about education reimagined, that we are talking about the future skills. So it's really much broader than just thinking about a particular class, a particular student, a particular teacher. We are also asking ourselves, can we keep up with computers? Did artificial intelligence just get too smart? What can we do with all of these developments? So the leading concepts that support the implementation of this new or changed or maybe adopted educational paradigm are not entirely new, but in a new context: personalization of learning, flexible learning, creative learning, active, independent, authentic learning, that also make us focus on some different skills, some different attitudes and values of our students that we need to have in mind, but not just students, ourselves also. That's one of the things we need to be aware. So to introduce these concepts into education, a series of methods and approaches are available today, which are mainly based on the technological achievements of the last decade. So what are some of the lessons that we have learned in different contexts? Some of them are similar, some of them are not, but I think that we learned that there are still many gaps that we need to have in mind. And if our first reaction when COVID happened and we need to do it remotely was technology first. Can we do it? How can we use the technology? At one point, there were a lot of slogans: pedagogy first. So it's not about technology, it's about pedagogy, but it's really about both. It's really about both. And I think that one of the big lessons that we learned is how aware we need to be about not just safety operations, about not just learning, but about well-being and equity. So that's something that we also need to have in mind. So what do we really talk about when we talk about blended online, hybrid, distance, remote? So the field of education really is marked by how to say, interdisciplinarity. It's marked with heterogeneity, and consequently, also by a multitude of concepts and terminology. That's not something that's new to education, but all this multitude of these concepts can and actually does cause confusion and misunderstanding, fears, prejudices, even because there is often a lack of clear and consistent definitions in terms and the terms are used in different ways by different organizations, by different individuals. So another thing to have in mind that it's important to have a shared understanding at the school level. What do we talk about when we talk about online, when we talk about remote? So there are really different modes of this e-learning or learning delivery. And what is remote learning? If we just come back, it's really about students and teachers interacting and engaging remotely using all of these devices that are available, that are still developing. It's the fact that students can participate from a location other than a physical classroom, and that this participation can be either synchronous or asynchronous. It's about accessing courses and resources and learn from anywhere at any time. And I think that sometimes this scares us a little bit because we don't have the control over the process. We don't never really have all the control. But this aspect, I think, make us wonder, is it going to be as well? Are students capable of doing it? But we need to be aware that it's about accessibility, it's about flexibility. So all of these challenges are present: motivation, engagement, self-regulation, self-organization, how to build a sense of community, how to interact. Do we have all this connectivity in terms of technical issues? What kind of skills are needed, both in terms of students as well as in terms of teachers? So remote teaching and learning in different modes definitely requires careful planning and attention to ensure its effectiveness and success. As Tony Bates states, we can at this point potentially define some modes of delivery as presented in this slide. There are others as well. But he also predicts that when teachers become more familiar with online learning and new technologies and more confident, there will also be more innovations in teaching. So over time, probably new forms of blended, hybrid, online learning will emerge as educators as well as administrators continue to experiment to increase enrollment, to primarily improve learning outcomes, and to provide greater flexibility for students. So I actually choose to show you this one because it provides three basic modes. It's traditional face-to-face. It says here with no technology, but I don't think there's really much face-to-face education without using any technology. On one side, there's fully online on the other side, and how could we say 50 shades of blended, which means everything in between. And what I think it's necessary to point out that there is no one right way, that we need to start from our own position and choosing a particular mode. What is also of crucial importance is to know where we are. What is our starting point? So we need to analyze. We need to analyze our instructional goals. We need to analyze our target audience characteristics. So to know what they can do, what we can do with them, and then go to learning objectives, to instructional strategies, to choose which strategies are most appropriate and things like that. So this is just one model that I think can be helpful. Of course, it can be, or it should be adapted a little bit, but it can be helpful in terms of what we need to think about when we decide and when we start to implement this model. What I would also like to point out are the theories of learning. So according to the prevailing opinion of Slovenian teachers when we did the research on remote learning, is that they actually found out, or they actually told us in one of the researches that learning at this point requires a different view of what knowledge is and how to acquire it. And the different theories of learning express different views of what knowledge is, what learning is. And by knowing these different theoretical approaches, teachers decide or can more easily decide how to design programs, courses, units, which learning strategy and methods best suit the contents, the needs of the learners, the objectives, the learning goals, etc. So the basic theories of learning that are most often also mentioned in the literature related to e-learning are behaviorism, cognitivism, constructivism. I'm pretty sure that you are familiar with them. Two theories then that were stimulated by the rise of e-learning less than 20 years ago are the theory of connectivism and the theory of community of inquiry. And there are also two other, the theory of heutagogy and the pedagogy of abundance. And those two theories actually emerged in the last decade as a result of further development of technology and change social circumstances and educational needs. So it's a little bit going back to the basics, let's say. So learning, yes, learning, remote learning, it really is about deep learning. So we need to think about pedagogical practices. We need to think about learning partnerships. We need to think about learning environments. And we, of course, need to think about leveraging digital. So how technologies can be best being used for more than just automation or consumption. So we need to think about redefining actually the whole process of teaching and learning. And going back a little bit, what reimagining learning really means. It means rethinking what's important to learn. It means rethinking how learning is fostered, when learning actually occurs, and what outcomes are measured. So there are many, of course, researches in this field, and the most powerful teaching practices, teaching quality, peer interaction, supporting pupils to work independently, different approaches, and of course, accessing or ensuring access to technologies, which is key, particularly for disadvantaged learnings. So it's basically what you might say, old questions, but they need a new or improved answers. And it's not about throwing out what we already know. It's about putting a new lens of depth over many of the effective pedagogies that remain essential. So it's about also eliminating the outdated, the ineffective ones. And this model most often requires the teacher to take on the role of facilitator, the role of activator, enabling students to have choice and take responsibility for their own learning. In a way, it is back to the future, but as I said at the beginning, context matters. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, context so matters. And I think that was a fantastic story about the learners actually starting to appreciate all of the theories of learning and actually seeing them in practice, because they're not sometimes in the class and so busy with what's happening in the class, they can reflect from a distance about what's happening. I won't take up too much time. I'm conscious it's 19 minutes past. Yvonne and Killian, do you want to step in and share your journey with us?
Yeah. Right, so we're going to talk a little bit about our journey with remote learning and sort of under the context of from Moodle to Teams. It's a journey we've come on. So just a little context about us is we're a secondary school based in Dublin in Ireland with just over 1,000 boys from second through to sixth year. So about 13 to 18-year-olds is who we have. And we have a blended learning environment, and we're very keen to keep it that way with the marriage of traditional and technological methods. So our journey really was before 2019, we had Moodle as our VLE and was working with us. We were using it quite statically, more like a website and for resources. And a number of most of our staff are using it in that fashion. So 4 academic years ago, 2019-2020, we trialed Microsoft Teams. Of course, March 2020 happened, and at that point, we had Moodle and Teams/Office 365. So we had sort of 2 different environments. And what we really quickly learned is that it was confusing for people to know where to go to, even though at the start we were saying there's only 2 classrooms, check them both. But we really wanted to streamline things, so it was obvious where to go. So we decided to stick with Teams, with the Office 365, which is now the Microsoft 365 environment. And that was 3 academic years ago, 2020, 2021, we all went on to Teams. At the same time, we invested in devices for our teaching staff. So we went with Microsoft Surface Pros, but I suppose the actual device is less important than what we want to do with it, and it's very easy to get hung up on. You know, everybody needs a device, but it's really how you use it. So we got everybody onto Teams, so that was our sort of one-stop shop, and everything fed off that. Then the following year, you know, the rate at which this happened, we were only saying today, was incredible, really. It was very successful, and we have a total mix of abilities within our teaching staff, from those who are very comfortable to those who were not very comfortable with technology. And we'd like to think now that everybody is comfortable. I suppose that's all around the world, through need as well, and necessity. So we introduced then student devices for 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th years for 3 of our 5-year groups 2 years ago. And then 1 year ago, we introduced student devices for our other 2-year groups. So as of this year, everybody now has a student device as well. We're a one-to-one school. So I suppose that the challenges, which is probably hopefully interesting for people here to hear, first of all, we're sort of managing those 2 systems, and we found that really having a very clear place for students to go to and look is really important. And Yvonne will talk a little bit about this and protocols. And the other thing that's really important, we found with remote learning and with digital learning, is the student and staff competencies. So we have a look at this with in-house training, so that teachers could learn off other teachers and peer-to-peer students learn off other students, and that we build that. And while we definitely engage with external training as well, we found the informal 5-minute sessions to be really, really effective. So we had a sort of an e-learning/IT team that leads that. And then that's supported with online resources such as Microsoft Learn Center, with Microsoft Innovative Educator, the course there with Wriggle in Ireland. Wriggle Connect have an online learning platform, so there's for further learning. And then also we have a shared learning group, and I think it's important, again, with how this has evolved, that, you know, initially we had an e-learning team and we sort of had tech liaison people within subject departments, and that we would go that way. And really, we've moved away from that, because obviously it comes into every aspect of learning and teaching to a different extent. And we now have our shared learning group, which is a group of teachers who meet roughly once a month. And as part of that, we have e-learning and remote learning. So that's sort of our journey to date, and I think I'll pass over to Yvonne now.
Yeah, so I thought it's very interesting that Matthew spoke there about careful planning and attention to ensure effectiveness and success. And I would say in the early stages, we were very reactionary rather than in the planning phase. And I think we probably since 2021, we have allowed ourselves to be in that planning phase rather than in the firefighting. Because certainly when we first went online, and you almost think it's easier when everybody is out and everybody's online at the same time, but what we quickly realized was our teachers didn't have the knowledge to make sure that with Teams meetings, you know, students weren't kicking each other out of the meetings. They weren't muting the teacher. They weren't, you know, doing things like that, which you can completely understand, because they're much quicker at picking things up than we are. So they have some tech savviness, but we needed to put the boundaries in around that so that everybody would be safe. So that's where we established a protocol in terms of remote learning and how they would engage with it. And once we rolled it out, we made sure that actually it was part of our code of behaviour, so that if somebody misbehaved in a remote learning session, that they were dealt with as they would have been dealt with, you know, if they were in school messing in class. So they'd be met by the principal and deputy principal online, and they'd actually lose their access to Microsoft 365 for at least 24 hours. And it's very interesting how now, you know, they don't want to lose their access. So that certainly has helped. Then we had a situation where we would have individual students at home, or we would have individual teachers at home. So for a variety of reasons, but mainly for COVID. And it was how would we manage their access to learning so that we could continue it. And it's something that we have continued to date, so that even when a student is at home, we'll email all of their teachers and ask them to provide and to facilitate remote learning for that student. And by and large, it's gone very, very well. Students will only not click in when they're actually very unwell, which is what you want, because you wouldn't want them, you know, trying to participate. So as useful as, you know, remote learning is, we also have to be very cognizant of the well-being of students and teachers, and that was obviously part of Matthew's presentation as well. And you know, like when we were all online at the same time, we reduced the class periods by 5 or 10 minutes, so there could be 10 minutes intervals between periods, so that students could get up and walk around, teachers could get up and clear their head. We also had a situation where we have provided exams online. So we would time it to go to the student through Teams and as an assignment 2 to 3 minutes before it would kick off in school. And then the student would have like 5 minutes to upload their work afterwards. So that has certainly changed our practice. But with that, we have to balance school refusal, because we would have students who are prone to that. So, you know, with any innovation, you just have to be careful of the context in which you're working, and that you're making sure that while you're providing access, you're also making sure that students are getting the socialised end of school where they come in and they see each other and they talk during lunch. We've also begun using the Reflect tab, you know, within Teams, which is very good in terms of asking students how they're feeling. So I think for those remote students who might be feeling a little bit isolated at home, it's a great way to check in with them. A single question sent out at the start of class, and it tells you very quickly how engaged they feel for that particular class and that particular day. So I am conscious that we have about 2 minutes. And look, we're still learning. We definitely are. Students that would have special educational needs found remote learning very challenging. And part of the reason was in the early stages because they didn't know where to look and they didn't know where the information was. So that took a whole piece of education as well, because tech can be very inclusive. But what we found is that for our boys, you definitely have to put in the education around it in order for them to access it fully. And we might just stop there so we make sure that we're on time.
I think that's a first. I really do. with 1 minute or 30 seconds to go. Oh, thank you so much. Matea, Yvonne, Killeen, that has been really useful and informative, and I think it just reassures everyone out there that we've all had challenges with the last few years, and it has been difficult. And again, as you mentioned at the beginning, it just seemed to be like firefighting, because you know there weren't these processes and policies in place, and then you know as we started to upskill and teachers became more au fait with using it and making sure cameras were on and that students didn't have the rights to be able to kick other people out, a confidence grew, a self-efficacy grew, which then allowed them to feel more confident in their delivery, because I suppose for most of us it was a new scenario that we had never been faced with before. So I suppose that confidence level of learners and teachers all started to increase, and I think we're now in a place where it's starting to become, I'm certainly seeing at higher education, it's becoming policy throughout, and a lot more courses are being delivered in that manner, and confident educators feeling that they they can really get the best out of learners and engage them online, because I know that was a challenge, certainly for me during that period. Engagement could be difficult. You know, we had to have policies about who could walk around in the background when learners were there, and you know, there was all sorts of strange things that you would never have thought of before. You know, that dad's just come out the shower with his dressing gown on in the background, and you're like, oh my, who thought to put that in a policy? So yeah, it was just all these surprises. But I think what it did help do as well was sometimes make learning a little bit more individual. So I know that some teachers felt that they could really home in with those that they could see were struggling because it was online. Sometimes in the class it's missed because you know, they're working in groups and it's maybe not as visible. But when you're in at home on your own, you can actually then spot the learners that are perhaps needing a little bit more support and help. That's us at past. I'm not going to take up any more time. We promised this would be succinct and short. Again, huge thank you to our 3 speakers today. If anybody has any questions, I'm sure they'll be happy to reply. Just get in touch with Aoife. She's got contact details for everybody. I think she knows everyone on the planet. So thank you. Have a great evening, and hopefully see you in 2 weeks' time for our last webinar, which will be on STEAM learning. So please join us for that. Have a great evening, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.